Hello Rayclast, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for the Tectonic Slam Screamo Berserker. This was my League Start character in Harvest League and it was a blast. As usual, you can find a Path of Building link in the video description with all the information for this character so you can browse it at your leisure and find any details you're interested in. Since I want to get back to playing the League on my next build as quickly as possible, this is going to be one of the quick format build guides without a lot of editing or scripting or anything. So don't expect a ton of detail here, but as I mentioned, you can find it all in the Path of Building. This is only the second character I've ever played to level 94, so that alone should tell you how fun it was for me. I thought it was super fun with all the new Warcry stuff and Slam stuff. I'll say that I've never played Tectonic Slam before this, so I don't have any point of reference or anything to compare it to before, but I thought it was great. This character total probably only has less than like 5 exalts into it, with a little caveat that I crafted a really nice sword, one of the better two-handed swords on the server for like 20 chaos. So that definitely helped me get things along. But overall the character is pretty cheap to get into. There are no mandatory unique items. I am using entirely rares, only some unique flasks, so that makes it really easy to cap your res and get good life and stuff, which is useful at League Start. This is the first character I've ever killed Awakening level 8 Cirrus on. It's the first time I've even gone to Awakening level 8. I don't think I've ever even done Cirrus at higher than 5 before, and I don't think I've ever taken my Atlas above 6. I did all of that, plus killing the big Harvest boss at only 6 days into the League, so overall I can say it was definitely an excellent League starter. Objectively, it's probably my best League starter ever based on that information. Had a ton of fun with it. The character is really fast at clearing, has okay single target. It's definitely not any kind of damage monster, at least on a budget. You are a melee character using LE overload, so you can't expect any kind of monster damage output, but it's definitely sufficient. And the biggest thing I really liked about the character is that it's just very stable, and you've got crazy sustain through Enduring Cry. So even if boss fights take a long time, you can last through them and do whatever you need to keep going. So with that being said, we'll go into the game and talk through the basics of the character, show you the gear and gem links and stuff, and then at the end of the video I'll probably paste a couple of boss fights like the end of the Awakening 8 Cirrus and maybe a Alhesman or one of the other Conquerors or something. So let's get right into it. Alright y'all, here we are in game now to give you a basic rundown of all the stuff on the character. As you saw in the video and as you can see on my skill bar, this is a super active character with a lot of skills to use, which is probably why I thought it was so fun and stuck with it for so long. We're using 4 different Warcries to take advantage of all the new power that they give, as well as Tectonic Slam of course, a dash for movement, and an Orb of Storms for helping us proc LE overload on bosses and also applying combustion to bosses to lower their fire resistance. We'll start by going through the gear up here. As I mentioned, I'm not actually using any unique items outside of flasks. All the rest of my gear is just rare, so that helps you keep stuff pretty cheap, and like I said, lets you get a lot of resistances and stuff. This character's pretty stable. As you can see, ended up at around 7,000 life, and we've got capped res, including chaos res, which I really enjoyed after feeling how nice it was to just not be scared of some of the chaos monsters that you're often scared of in builds. On this character, it was really smooth. I think I'm definitely going to make it a higher priority to try and get more chaos res in all of my builds from now on. It just made a lot of things feel a lot smoother than they do on most of my characters where I'm sitting at, the minus 60 chaos res. I just don't think that's really appropriate in Path of Exile these days with how dangerous chaos damage has gotten. So of course, you want to focus on getting as much life as possible on all of your gear. You'll see I've got life rolls on all of my rare items here. And of course, capping your res, getting as much chaos res where you can. And it's really important that you try to find a couple good accuracy rolls somewhere. I've got an okay one on my gloves and a good one on my helmet. And combined with the precision R, that ended up being enough to max out my stuff. For your weapon, you don't actually have to use swords. I went with swords because I think they just have a little bit better nodes on the tree than the other weapons. But we're only taking a couple of sword-specific nodes, as we'll detail here in a sec, but we're right next to all these other weapon wheels, so you could use whatever kind of weapon you want. I just went with swords, mostly because originally I was planning on using Doomsower on this character, but ended up ditching that idea because I discovered how incredibly overpowered Enduring Cry is now, and you do not want to lose that regen by having the Vol Pact from Doomsower. So instead, I crafted this rare sword. As I said, it only cost me about 20 chaos to craft, and it's one of the better swords on the server. It's a really, really strong one. I'm still hoping that maybe eventually I will find a crit slam harvest craft so I can add crit multi to it. Then it would be really, really nice for selling. Obviously not for me since I'm using LE overload, so crit multi doesn't do anything. But this turned out really nice. It's currently sitting at something like 650 PDPS with crit, which helps us keep Ellie Overload up more reliably. As for gem links, our main attack is Tectonic Slam, and we have that linked with elemental damage with attacks, fire penetration, melee physical damage, fortify, and Fist of War. I'm not totally 100% sold on the Fist of War. It's really nice for clearing and stuff, but we do attack super fast, so we kind of lose a little bit of the effectiveness from it. Sometimes you're wasting a few attacks, and maybe something like a Pulverize would be better there. But overall, I think the Fist of War is really cool, and it's really nice for clearing. As our secondary main damage setup, we are using Infernal Cry. Any melee support gems that you link with Infernal Cry will support the Combust skill that it procs on your exerted attacks following it, so it's definitely worth supporting that up. We're supporting it with Pulverize, Fire Penetration, Melee Physical Damage, Wed, and Second Wind in this case. I didn't even think of it until like level 70, but you can support Warcries with Second Wind, and of course that gives you 2 charges and makes them cool down faster, so I definitely recommend having all of your Warcries supported by Second Wind. Very strong option. Our other Warcries up here don't need any extra links with them because their exerted attacks aren't affected in that way, so we're using Intimidating Cry, Enduring Cry, and Seismic Cry, also linked with Second Wind. Down in our gloves here, we have our movement setup, which is Dash and Second Wind. That helps us get around really fast. And we also have an Orb of Storms linked with Combustion, as mentioned previously. Lowers fire resist on enemies. I'll mention that to get that Combustion to work, you need some flat added fire damage to spells somewhere, since of course Orb of Storms is lightning by default. So on my other ring over here, I just did this Syndicate craft that adds 6 to 9 generic fire damage and 6 to 10 cold damage, but that cold damage doesn't matter. This applies to attacks and spells, so that lets our Orb of Storms ignite and proc Combustion. Finally, we have a Summoned Ice Golem linked with Molten Shell and Cast when damage taken, so those goes off and help keeps us safe. We're using Precision to give us some crit chance to make sure we proc Ellie Overload more reliably and to get our accuracy capped out. And finally, this build is really link starved, so I definitely recommend trying to get an unset ring so you can also fit in a Herald of Ash. There are some other options you could do. You could just use a War Chief instead of the Orb of Storms if you want to go that route for a little more damage that way instead of using the Combustion for lowered fire res. You can mess around with things. You could try a Watcher's Eye with using Anger perhaps to get the rest of your fire conversion instead of doing it on the tree. But I decided that this was the way to go. For flasks, we're using a Quicksilver of Heat, just to help us get around maps a little faster and pick up items, a Chemist's Basalt of Warding, and then for unique flasks, we're using Lion's Roar, Wise Oak, and Blood of the Caraway. We do not need any bleed removal anywhere because this Admonisher node that I will say we have anointed on our amulet makes it so anytime you Warcry, you remove an ailment, so that'll take off bleeds, corrupting bloods, ignites, poisons, anything like that. Makes it super useful for Sirius because you don't need a corrupted jewel with no corrupting blood because you can just Warcry and take off the stacks from the spinning beam. We'll look through the passive tree now. We're Berserker, of course, for our Ascendancy. We go through life and armor, more life, pick up the accuracy in both the Marauder and Templar zones, some AoE and weapon damage stuff here on our way up to Elemental Overload. Pick up jewel slots as well. You just want to focus, on damage and life. Jewel slots as usual. You don't need anything special there. Make sure you go in here and grab these 2 nodes that were just added in this patch. That'll give you the rest of the 40% Fizz to fire conversion you need to make your Tectonic Slam 100% fire. Grab all the Warcry nodes that you go by. We go around this side of the physical 2-handed wheel. Through life, more Warcry nodes. As I said, I picked swords, so we went with these sword nodes, but you could actually use any weapon type and just grab half a wheel there. Head down to more Warcry stuff in life, and down to this area for Lava Lash, which is a really nice boost, of course, for any kind of fire attacker. And we're using a bit of a cluster jewel setup here. This was kind of expensive at this point, but with the changes that are supposed to be coming in next week, good cluster jewels should become a lot more affordable, so that should definitely cut down on the budget of the build a bit, even though it's already pretty cheap. It is very important that you get Fuel the Fight. That's going to be your only source of mana leech on this build since you're full elemental, and we don't want to go all the way over here to the duelist area or whatever to get any of that generic mana leech. And I went with Feed the Fury for some life leech, and it also gives a lot of attack speed and stuff, of course. You don't have to have this, but you definitely want leech somewhere. You could get that on an amulet or whatever. Amulets can roll generic fire leech. We go into a medium cluster, going for Warcry stuff with the exerted attack damage. The two that you want are Mob Mentality, which makes it so your Warcries are going to generate Power, Frenzy, and Endurance charges for you, and Lead by Example, which will give you Onslaught every time you Warcry. Finally, I just followed it up with a typical small life cluster jewel with Fettle to get a little more extra life there. The only things, like I said, that are really mandatory in this jewel setup are the Fuel to Fight for Mana Leech, and then both of these Warcry nodes are really powerful in terms of utility. For our Ascendancy, this is where we get a ton of damage along with our Warcries that helps us carry the build on a pretty low budget and being a LE Overload character. I started by getting Warbringer first. This makes it so your Warcries generate rage for the enemies around them and makes it so exerted attacks, which is essentially all of our attacks on this character, particularly on bosses, are dealing 50% more damage. Then I grabbed the Aspect of Carnage for another 40% generic damage, so it's not very often you get that much damage, but our Ascendancy is giving us just a 90% more damage on all of our attacks, which is huge. And then we went to Crave the Slaughter for some extra rage generation, and Rite of Ruin, which gives us stun immunity and makes us really fast. For the Pantheon choices, I've gone with Soul of Solaris and captured the Eater of Souls, that is the Malachi boss in the core map. That'll make it so you can't be chain crit and give you some extra mitigation in general. And then I went with Soul of Gruthkul with the Arabic Lightbane upgrade. Reduces enemy attack speed when you hit them, which is also pretty strong defensively. That's really all there is to say about the character and the gear and links and stuff. As I said, I'll slap up a couple of boss fights here at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like that video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Best way you can help this channel grow is just watching and sharing videos. If you want to support more directly, you can click the join button below the YouTube video, which is similar to subscribing to someone on Twitch. If you're interested in more just general clearing footage on this character, just go to my channel and search for Tectonic Slam, and you'll find tens of hours of footage from the stream of general clearing and Atlas progression and stuff. So thank you all for watching. Stay safe out there during these crazy corona times, and hopefully we'll see you in Rayclast. Feel free to add me and ask any questions you have or anything. I am always willing to help. The performance goes a little better than the freaking Baron fight. Got him. Not super quickly.